A wonderful message by Anisio today. Resem sunny day and say these words in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Julio. Thank you for braving it. Thank you very much. Guys, as always, we talk about, well, at least the way I like to do, I open the gospel according to Spiritism randomly and try to get a message to talk about. And today is chapter 16, which you cannot serve both God and Mammon, which is exactly square where the Gospel in Kardec comments the challenge we have in dealing with wealth, we're dealing with money in our spiritual growth. And that's probably the most difficult balance we all on earth have to deal with. I think no matter where you are, no matter what kind of life you have, you always is going to be, it's going to be always a challenge to balance your efforts into bringing material resources to you, to your family, to your community, and bringing spiritual resources to you, to your family, and to those around you. And I think the bad news is that Jesus was so clear about the challenges of wealth, right? That you probably have heard the famous passage in the gospel where he told the disciples, it's easier for a camel to come through the eye of a needle than a rich man go to the kingdom of heaven, right? And nowadays when we hear that, it sounds really bad because there's no way you're going to get I mean, when you think about a camel, an animal, which is a pretty large animal, if you have seen it, and in the eye of a needle for us, I don't know about you, but when I think about the eye of a needle, it's tiny. Actually, we struggle to have anything. I mean, those things are small. And pretty much you're doomed if you're rich, if you interpret that way. But just to give you perspective, camel was the way people using camel hair were the way people used to do strings, ropes, make ropes in the back in the day. That's 2,000 years ago, right? So they would call the rope and the rope and the animal the same thing. So camel was also a nickname for the ropes. And needles, I know when we think about modern needles, they're tiny and small. Well, 2,000 years ago, we didn't have the machinery we have today. So needles were made by hand. They were nowhere as small as we have them today. They were much bigger. Then it becomes more reasonable, right? It's possible. But still, Jesus is giving us a perspective of difficulty. It's giving us a notion that wealth will bring us a tremendous challenge to value, to work on our spiritual growth. That's the key to the message. And why is that? It's simple. Wealth makes everything easier, right? If you have a large amount of financial resources nowadays, you choose where you live, you choose who you live with, you choose the services that come for you, you choose pretty much the way your life manifests, right? It's much easier, right? And when we tend to choose those things, quite often we choose the easier path. For instance, if you have a lot of resources, you choose who you live with, right? And all of us, we have people that, especially even in our families, we have people we don't get along very well, and we have people we get along, and the middle ground. With a lot of wealth, no way you're going to be with the ones that you don't get along. Can you imagine yourself imagine if you could choose. I can buy a house anywhere I want, and I can bring wherever I want. Chances are you're not going to bring the people you don't get along with, or you feel some repulsion, right? Opposite. if you have limited resources, if your family is more like constrained in terms of resources, you live with whoever is next to you. You live with the difficult cousin, the brothers, the sisters, the whoever has to be there, and you live with them. Which one is more conducive to spiritual growth? I know we want to think about, all the people that annoy us. Distance is the best remedy. But does that solve the problem? Not really. That just postpones it. Because what happens is I just put all, distance between those that give me challenge and myself. Spiritual growth, unfortunately, happens when we have to interact with each other, when we have to figure out ways to maintain our balance in the presence of those that bring us challenge, and figure out ways to deal with them in a more constructive way, even though they might not be constructive, even though the relationship may be difficult. So in that sense, spiritual growth happens when we go through experiences that might not be ideal from our comfort perspective. They make us grow. So you understand, this is a simple example where wealth prevents sometimes us from going to the experiences we need to go through, right? Because we just postpone them. We just don't need to engage with them. And lack of sometimes forces us to go to the spiritual growth. And that happens in everything. That happens pretty much in all sorts of circumstances. And in the gospel, Jesus goes as far as specifically listing wealth as one of the challenges. In the early Christians, if you check the saying and the things, the passages of the gospel, early Christians were pretty against wealth. They were pretty much very concerned about having the rich people coming into the group, into the movement, right? And remember that there's another factor. As time evolves and as societies grow and mature, the more complicated society is, the more corrupt or the more exploitation exists in a society, the higher the chance somebody that has accumulated wealth is also engaged in some sort of devious acts, right? The more organized, the more entrepreneurial a community is, the easier the path for someone to make accumulate wealth, but within a scope of righteousness, in a sense of not exploiting or not, So, but there's always a line there. There's always, eventually, if we had let's say we had a balanced society with laws that apply to every single one of us, the same, with opportunities for all of us, then wealth would only be based on effort and work and entrepreneurship. That would be the ideal scenario, right? We're not quite there yet, but eventually we hope to. And that's where it's a segue where, in a way, wealth has a role in fostering our growth as a society, as a community. If you think about many of the projects that have changed our world, wouldn't have happened without a certain accumulation of wealth to guide us. Cures for diseases that come from heavy studies from for-profit pharmaceutical companies, even the growth of internet we have today, right? Although it started as a government project, eventually evolved into this massive enterprise, right? A lot of the technologies we take for granted today, they came along that changed our life, the way we live, the products we used, came from this research and development that came for profit. So wealth is far from being something bad, right? What really wealth poses a challenge is for those that bear it, for those that have it. For those that are in the spiritual path, what is the problem? If you bring to your mind the idea that, okay, I'm not just a body. This is not just one off passage and my life won't be just this, whatever years I spend on this body here on earth. When you engage into the spiritual perspective in life, you see yourself as a being that will be alive long after your body is gone, and probably, most likely, alive even before your body was formed. Then, we are invited to look beyond the immediate interest of my current life, my situation right here, right now. So we are invited to put things in perspective, right? And when we put things in perspective, we might do some decisions that are not rational from the point of view of the moment. Case in point, helping others, right? How many times we have so many people around us that plan poorly financially or have a pretty lack of discipline in dealing with those things? And is it our problem? No. But if we do have those financial resources, is that person my problem? We have to ask that question to ourselves. And this is the answer is not easy. Sometimes your conscience might tell you, okay, it's not the time to intervene, and we'd have to let this person run the experience and learn from it. But sometimes your conscience tells you differently. Sometimes your conscience tells you, okay, it's time to intervene. It's time to make a difference. It's time to make this person matter. And although that might make no sense from a financial perspective, your conscience is telling you differently. And that's why when we hear from the perspective in the spiritual realm, when we hear the words from those that cross to the other side, and this is the blessing we have in Spiritism, right? I'm going to give you an example. We have a series of books from André Luiz, psychographic by Chico Xavier, a medium that lived in Brazil past century. And it gave us a tremendous wealth in terms of publications that describe in many different ways the life in the spiritual realm and the life we should expect. And one of the collections that we have right now that we study and we appreciate tremendously is what we call the André Luiz collection, which is a series of about 16 books that describe the experience this person had in crossing to the spiritual realm, right? So it's something that what we're going to do, it doesn't mean we're going to have the same experience as him, right? But it gives you like one example, right? This person crossed. And the name of the first book is called Nosso Lar, Our Hogar in Spanish. And I think there's no translation in because it's the name of a place, right? So they don't translate in English. You still call it Nosso Lar. It's a place so we think there's places in the spiritual realm the same way there's places here, right? And the Nosso Lar is the first one, the beginning of his journey when he passed away. He was not a religious person. He was not engaged much with religion at all, right? And his whole journey about, waking up on the other side and starting to be aware of it. And he was a physician in his professional life, right? And when he crossed to the other side, the greatest treasure he found on the other side were actually people that he somehow helped and remember him and were grateful to him. He found just a handful, specifically one lady that crossed to the other side, and because he helped her during a moment of difficulty, she never forgot about him. She never forgot about him at all. And he forgot about her. Actually, he did it out of a very, he didn't even remember her because he didn't put any mindset. He did the business part of things. He was a physician for profession. He was not a physician in heart. So he did it with the business. He was his profession. And that person was so incredibly helpful to him. And what amazes me is that all the memories, all the accumulation of health, all the resources he accumulated counted pretty much zero, because at that point in time, he couldn't tap anything. And that's the that's the invitation to us. The wealth we're going to have on the other side is only connected to the people that we have around us. Sometimes when your conscience tells you to do something, it's because that will generate you 10 times over the wealth you're going to need in the future. Because the impact you have in other people's lives is your true wealth. The wealth you have right now, from a financial perspective, is just temporary for the moment you have here right now. That's sort of the logic the spirits want to tell us, and the information they give us beforehand. And knowing that, here's the blessing we have. If we know that, we can always meditate in our lives and put the proper value on things we're doing. It's not that wealth has no value. There is. It's important because it provides us the resources and the tools to manifest things in our life. But it's also a very dangerous trap if I engage with it without the balance of spirituality. And my voice is kind of going away as well, so I think that's kind of where we're going to stop today. And I hope suggesting you, if you haven't yet, so reading the book Nosso Lar, right? To get you this incredible journey from André Luiz. And with that in mind, we say thank you to everybody, and we're going to transition now to our passes. Thank you very much. Thank you. See you soon.